The morning sun hadn't fully climbed over the glass towers of downtown yet, but inside the Viridian Technologies headquarters, the day was already in full swing. The building stood like a polished obsidian blade against the pale blue sky. 40 stories of steel, ambition, and quiet power. On the 28th floor, just outside the private executive elevator, a man in a charcoal gray suit stood with his arms crossed, tapping one polished shoe against the marble floor. He wasn't used to waiting. Not for elevators, not for meetings, and certainly not for anything that moved slower than his own thoughts. He checked his watch again. 7:45 a.m. His board presentation started in 15 minutes, and it wasn't just any meeting. This was the moment he'd been preparing for all quarter, unveiling a new artificial intelligence platform that promised to reshape how hospitals managed patient care. Investors were flying in from 3 continents. Cameras would be rolling, and here he was stuck in a hallway because a machine worth more than most people's houses had decided to take a coffee break. Behind him, 2 security guards shifted uncomfortably. One had already called building maintenance twice. They said the earliest they can get someone up here is 8:30, the younger guard muttered, eyes darting toward the silent elevator doors. It's some kind of sensor glitch. They don't even know which part failed. The man in the suit let out a short, dry laugh. Of course they don't. He ran a hand through his neatly combed hair, frustration simmering just beneath his calm exterior. He'd built his company on precision, on systems that worked without question. And now on the most important morning of the year, a dumb metal box was holding him hostage. Just then the service door at the end of the hall opened with a soft click. A man stepped out, wearing faded navy coveralls, rubber-soled shoes, and carrying a worn canvas bucket filled with cleaning supplies. He moved quietly like someone used to being unseen. His face was lined with the kind of tired that comes from working while the rest of the world sleeps. He paused when he saw the small group gathered by the elevator, then gave a small, polite nod. "Morning," he said, voice low but clear. No one answered right away. The guards looked embarrassed, as if caught failing at their job. The man in the suit barely glanced at him. Janitors were part of the building's background noise, like the hum of the HVS or the soft chime of the lobby doors. But then the janitor stopped a few feet away and tilted his head, studying the elevator panel like it was a puzzle he'd seen before. After a moment, he spoke again. "Give me 1 minute," he said. "I can fix that." The words hung in the air, simple and direct. The man in the suit turned slowly, eyebrows lifting. He looked the janitor up and down. The frayed cuffs, the smudge of grease near his elbow, the calm in his eyes that didn't match his station. A chuckle escaped him, not unkind, but full of disbelief. "You're going to fix a $200,000 smart elevator? With a mop bucket?" The janitor didn't smile. He didn't get defensive. He just set his bucket down gently on the floor, pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket, worn but well kept, and stepped toward the elevator control panel beside the doors. "Not with the bucket," he said. "With this." The man in the suit watched, arms still crossed, amusement flickering across his face. He glanced at his watch again. 1 minute, fine, let him try. He wasn't about to miss his meeting over pride, but if this ended with sparks flying or a fire alarm going off, he'd have someone's head. Still, something about the janitor's quiet confidence made him pause. Most people would have backed off after that chuckle. This man hadn't even blinked. Without another word, the janitor knelt. He pressed a hidden seam near the base of the panel, something no one else seemed to know was there, and a thin access door clicked open. Inside wasn't just wires and blinking lights. It was a nest of connections, labeled in a mix of manufacturer codes and handwritten notes in smudged pencil. The janitor's fingers moved quickly but carefully, tracing a path through the tangle like he was reading a familiar map. The man in the suit crouched slightly, curiosity overtaking impatience. "You've done this before?" "Not this exact model," the janitor replied, not looking up. "But I've seen the guts of enough machines to know they all lie the same way when they break." "What's that supposed to mean?" "They don't fail randomly. They tell you why, if you know how to listen." He adjusted a small relay switch, then tapped a sensor with the flat end of his tool. A soft beep echoed from inside the wall, then another. The elevator display above the doors flickered, from a blank screen to the number 28. The man in the suit straightened up, eyes wide. The doors slid open with a smooth, quiet sigh, revealing the pristine interior of the executive car, mahogany panels, soft lighting, even a faint scent of sandalwood. It looked like nothing had ever gone wrong. The janitor stood, brushed his knees off, and picked up his bucket. "Told you." 1 minute, silence filled the hallway. The guard stared. The man in the suit just looked at him, really looked for the first time. There was no showmanship, no demand for praise. The janitor had already turned to leave, heading back toward the service stairwell like he had floors to clean and a schedule to keep. "Wait," the man in the suit said, his voice softer now. The janitor paused but didn't turn around. "What's your name?" "Doesn't matter," came the reply. "I'm just doing my job." "You just saved mine," the man said, and meant it, a small shrug. "Then we're even." And with that, he disappeared through the service door, leaving behind only the faint smell of floor wax and the quiet hum of a perfectly working elevator. The man in the suit stood there for a long moment, staring at the open elevator doors. He'd walked past that janitor 100 times before, maybe more, and never once thought to ask his name. Never once considered that the person mopping the floors at 3 a.m. might understand the building's nervous system better than the engineers who designed it. He stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the top floor, and as the doors closed, he didn't check his watch. He checked his assumptions, because in less than 60 seconds, a man with calloused hands and quiet eyes had done something no boardroom strategist or six-figure consultant could. He'd fixed what was broken, without fanfare, without expectation, and without needing anyone to notice, but someone had noticed, and that changed everything. The ride to the top floor felt different this time. Lighter, not just because the elevator worked, but because something inside the man had shifted. He'd spent years building a reputation on being the smartest person in every room. But this morning, in a quiet hallway before sunrise, he'd met someone who didn't need a title to be brilliant. As the elevator slowed to a stop, he took a deep breath. The boardroom awaited, cameras, investors, a future he'd meticulously planned. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about his presentation. He was thinking about a man in coveralls who saw solutions where others saw problems, and who asked for nothing in return. When the doors opened, he walked out with purpose, but his mind was already circling back to that hallway, to that minute, to that quiet voice saying, "I can fix that." He didn't know it yet, but that 1 minute would echo far longer than any board meeting ever could. The board meeting went better than anyone expected. The presentation flowed smoothly. The investors leaned forward in their chairs, and by lunchtime, the company's stock had already ticked upward. But even as people congratulated him, shook his hand and called it his best work yet, the man in the charcoal gray suit couldn't stop thinking about that quiet moment in the hallway, the 1 minute that had changed the entire morning. He replayed it in his head while signing documents, while eating a salad he barely tasted, while staring out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city below. It wasn't just that the elevator had been fixed. It was how it had been fixed, with calm hands, no fuss, no need for permission or praise. That kind of quiet competence was rare. In his world, people shouted their achievements from rooftops. They demanded credit, bonuses, headlines. But this man, the janitor, had simply done what needed doing and walked away. By mid-afternoon, curiosity had turned into something stronger, respect. And respect in his mind demanded action. He called building operations. "Who's the night shift janitor on floors 25 through 30? He asked. There was a pause on the other end. "You mean Eli? Eli Dawson? Just tell me where he is." "He's not on shift right now, sir. He works nights, comes in around 10 p.m., leaves at 6 a.m. The man in the suit frowned. "Then find out when he's back. And get me his full work file. Not the summary, everything." "Yes, sir." He hung up, then walked to the window again. The sun was lower now, casting long golden streaks across the glass towers. He thought about how easy it would have been to ignore that voice in the hallway. How many times had he walked past someone like Eli without really seeing them? Too many to count. That evening, long after the office emptied out, he stayed late, not to work, but to wait. He sat in his dimly lit office with a cup of cold coffee, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Around 10:15 p.m., his phone buzzed. Security had spotted Eli entering through the service entrance. Without a word, the man in the suit grabbed his coat and took the service elevator down, not the executive one, but the old rattling one used by maintenance staff. He stepped out into the quiet basement hallway, where the air smelled faintly of bleach and damp concrete. Down the corridor, he saw the soft glow of a flashlight moving slowly across the floor. He followed the light until he found him, kneeling beside a large industrial air handler in the server room annex, wiping down vents with a cloth. Eli looked up when he heard footsteps, his expression unreadable. "You're still here," Eli said, not surprised, "just stating a fact." "I wanted to thank you properly," the man said, standing a few feet away, careful not to loom. "For this morning." Eli wiped his hands on his coveralls. "No need. It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," the man replied. "It was everything. I had a room full of people waiting, millions on the line, and you just knew what to do." Eli stood slowly, his movements careful, like his body carried old aches. "I spent 10 years in the Navy fixing radar systems, comms gear, lift mechanisms on aircraft carriers. Machines break the same way everywhere. Bad connection, worn part, software glitch. You just have to listen. You never tried to get engineering work after you left?" A small, tired smile. "Tried. But civilian jobs want degrees, certifications, fancy resumes. I've got hands that know how things work, but no paper to prove it. So, floors it is." The man in the suit nodded slowly. He'd heard that story before, too many times. Brilliant people stuck in invisible roles because the system only sees what's on paper, not what's in a person. "Do you like it?" he asked. "The cleaning work?" Eli looked around the dim room at the humming servers, the coiled hoses, the quiet rhythm of the building at night. "It's honest work. Pays the bills. Lets me be alone with my thoughts. And sometimes," he added, glancing toward the air handler, "I get to tinker." The man noticed something then on the wall beside the unit. A small whiteboard with neat handwriting. "Fan motor overheating, check capacitor. Replace filter every 14 days. It wasn't part of any official log. It was Eli's own notes, his own system. "You've been fixing things around here, haven't you?" the man asked. Eli didn't deny it. "If I see something about to break, I nudge it back. No one asks. No one notices. But the building runs smoother." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the low hum of electronics and the distant drip of a pipe somewhere down the hall. Then the man said, "What if someone did notice?" Eli looked at him, eyes sharp now. "What do you mean?" "What if you didn't have to mop floors to pay the bills? What if you could spend your nights doing what you're actually good at, keeping this whole place running like it should?" Eli shook his head gently. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm not an engineer. Not on paper." "You don't need paper to understand a circuit board," the man said. "You proved that this morning." Eli was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My daughter's sick. Needs treatments. Insurance doesn't cover all of it. This job, it's steady. I can't risk losing it for something that might not work out." The man in the suit felt a lump in his throat. He'd been so focused on talent and systems that he'd forgotten the human part. The reason Eli was here in the first place. Not for glory, not for a career move, but for someone he loved. "I'm not asking you to quit," he said carefully. "I'm asking if you'd be willing to try something new, with no risk. Keep your current job, your pay, your hours. But during your shift, instead of just cleaning, you look at the building systems, report anything you see, fix what you can, and I'll make sure you're paid for that too." Eli studied him, searching for hidden strings, for fine print. But there was none. Just a man who'd seen something real and wanted to honor it. "Why?" Eli finally asked. "Why me?" "Because most people see a problem and call someone else. You see a problem and solve it. That's rare. And valuable." Eli looked down at his hands, rough, stained with oil and soap, but steady. Then he nodded just once. "All right. I'll try." The next few weeks passed quietly. Eli continued his night rounds, but now he carried a small tablet provided by the man in the suit. Logging observations. Boiler pressure fluctuating, likely faulty valve. Network closet B3 overheating, add fan. Lobby fountain pump clogged, cleaned, running fine. At first, the maintenance team was skeptical. Who was this janitor telling them how to do their jobs? But then they checked his notes and found he was right. Every time. One night, the main cooling system for the data center started making a strange grinding noise. The on-call technician was 2 hours away. Panic spread through the night staff. Overheating servers could mean millions in lost data. But before anyone could escalate it, Eli was already in the mechanical room. He listened to the unit for a full minute, then opened a side panel. Inside, a small metal bracket had come loose and was vibrating against a fan blade. He tightened it with a wrench from his belt. The noise stopped. The IT manager, who'd been pacing nearby, stared at him. "How did you know?" Eli just shrugged. "Same sound my old fridge made before it died." Same fix, word started to spread. Not loudly, but steadily, like water finding its level. People began leaving notes for Eli. "The printer on 18 keeps jamming. The motion sensor in the east stairwell is too sensitive." He'd show up, take a look, and more often than not, leave it working better than before. The man in the suit watched it all from a distance, not interfering, just observing. He saw how Eli never took credit, never asked for more. He fixed what was broken and moved on, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But something else was happening too. The building itself seemed to breathe easier. Fewer outages, lower energy bills, less downtime. The CFO even mentioned it in a meeting. "Our operational costs are down 12% this quarter." No idea why. The man in the suit smiled to himself. He knew why. One rainy Thursday night, he came down to the basement again. He found Eli not cleaning, but sitting on an overturned bucket near the electrical room, eating a sandwich from a paper bag. Rain tapped softly against the high windows. "Mind if I join you?" the man asked. Eli gestured to the floor beside him. "Plenty of room." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain and the hum of the building. "You've saved us a lot of money," the man said finally. "Didn't do it for money," Eli replied. "I know. That's why it matters." Eli took a bite of his sandwich, then said, "You know, most people think fixing things is about tools or parts. But it's not. It's about paying attention. Machines talk if you're willing to listen." The man thought about that. In his world, everyone was shouting, emails, alerts, notifications, demands. No one listened. "Not really. Teach me how to listen," he said. Eli looked at him surprised. "You're the boss. You don't need to learn that." "I think I do," the man said, "because I've spent my whole life building things that people use, but I forgot to build a place where people like you are seen." Eli didn't answer right away. Then he pointed to a small panel on the wall. "See that green light? It's supposed to blink every 5 seconds. Means the backup generator's charging, but last week it started blinking every 6. No one noticed. But I did. Checked the battery terminals, corrosion, cleaned it. Now it's back to 5. The man stared at the tiny light, blinking steadily in the dim room. He'd walked past that panel 100 times and never once looked at it. "Most people only see what's broken," Eli said softly. "But the real skill is seeing what's about to break, and caring enough to stop it." The rain grew heavier outside, drumming against the glass like 1,000 quiet hands. Inside, 2 men, one in a suit worth more than most cars, the other in worn coveralls, sat side by side, not as boss and employee, but as 2 people who finally understood each other. And in that moment, something shifted, not just in the building, but in the way it was run. Because real change doesn't come from boardrooms or billion-dollar budgets. It comes from one person saying, "I can fix that," and another person believing them. The man in the suit stood up, brushed off his pants and held out his hand, not for a handshake, but to help Eli up. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm creating a new role, systems optimizer. Reports directly to me. Salary triple what you're making now, full benefits. And your first job? Train me how to listen." Eli looked at him, then at the blinking green light, then back at the man's face. For the first time he smiled, a real one, warm and quiet. "All right," he said. "But fair warning, I don't go easy on beginners." The man laughed. "Good, I've had enough easy." And as they walked out of the basement together, the building hummed around them, not just with electricity and data, but with something deeper: respect, trust, and the quiet power of being seen. The offer hung in the air like steam after a hot shower, real, warm, and a little hard to believe. Eli didn't say yes right away. He didn't say no either. He just stood there in the dim basement hallway, rain still tapping against the high windows, his sandwich forgotten in its paper bag. The man in the suit waited, not pushing, not filling the silence with promises or pressure. He'd learned that much already. Some things need room to settle. It wasn't just the money, though, that mattered. more than he'd ever admit out loud. His daughter's next round of treatments was coming up, and the co-pays alone made his stomach twist every time he looked at the bills stacked on his kitchen table. But it was more than that. It was pride. It was fear. It was the quiet voice in his head whispering, "You're a janitor. You don't belong in meetings. You don't belong in that world." He'd seen how people like him were treated when they stepped out of line, out of their place. He'd watched good men with calloused hands and sharp minds get laughed out of interviews because they didn't have the right degree, the right shoes, the right last name. He didn't want pity. He didn't want a handout. He just wanted a chance to do what he knew how to do without having to clean up after it. "I'll need to think about it," he finally said. The man nodded.
"Take all the time you need."
"But know this, I'm not offering you a favor. I'm offering you a partnership. This building runs because of people like you. It's time it started acting like it." Eli walked home that night under a sky still dripping with rain, his boots splashing through puddles, his mind racing. His apartment was small, a 2-bedroom on the edge of the city with peeling paint and a fridge that hummed too loud. But it was clean, warm, and full of life. His daughter Lily was asleep on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a book open on her chest. She was 10, with eyes too old for her face and a laugh that could still light up a room, even on her worst days. He tucked the blanket tighter around her, kissed her forehead gently, and sat at the kitchen table. The offer replayed in his head. Systems optimizer. Reports directly to me. Triple the pay. It sounded like something from a movie, not his life. But then he thought about the elevator, about the cooling unit, about the way that man had looked at him, not down, not past, but straight in the eyes, like he saw something worth keeping. The next morning, after dropping Lily off at school, she insisted she felt fine, even though her steps were slower than usual. Eli went back to the building, not for his shift, but to talk. He found the man in his office, not behind a massive desk, but sitting at a small round table near the window, sipping coffee from a plain ceramic mug, no assistants hovering, no screens flashing stock prices. Just quiet. "You came back," the man said, standing. "I did," Eli said, "but I've got conditions." "Name them." "First, I keep my hours. I work nights. Lily, she needs me in the mornings. Doctor appointments, school stuff. I can't do 9 to 5. Done, you set your own schedule. Second, I don't wear a suit. I wear what I need to wear to get the job done. If that's coveralls, that's coveralls." The man smiled. "I'd be worried if you showed up in a tie. Third, and this is the big one, I don't want special treatment. If I mess up, you tell me. If I'm wrong, you say so. I don't need you protecting me because you feel guilty or grateful or whatever this is." The man's expression softened. "Fair, and I'll add one of my own. You speak up. If you see waste, if you see danger, if you see a better way, you say it loudly. No more notes left on desks. You have a seat at the table now." Eli took a breath. Then he nodded. "All right. I'm in." That Monday, a new badge appeared on Eli's lanyard. Not custodial staff, but field systems optimizer. No one knew what it meant, but they'd soon find out. At first, people didn't know how to act around him. The maintenance crew eyed him like he'd betrayed them. The engineers in the tech department whispered behind their coffee cups. Even the security guards weren't sure whether to salute or nod, but Eli didn't try to win them over with speeches. He just kept doing what he'd always done, only now he had permission to do it fully. His first official task? Audit the building's energy usage. The company had pledged to go carbon neutral in 5 years, but progress was slow. Eli spent 3 nights walking every floor, checking every panel, listening to every machine. He didn't use fancy software. He used his ears, his hands, his memory. He found that the HVAC system was running full blast on weekends, even though the building was empty. A simple timer fix saved $18,000 a month. He noticed that the server room's cooling fans were set to maximum 24/7, even when server load was low. He reprogrammed the sensors to adjust dynamically. Another $12,000 saved. He discovered that the motion sensor lights in the parking garage were so sensitive, they stayed on all night from stray cats and wind-blown trash. He recalibrated them. Lower bills, less light pollution. Each fix was small on its own, but together they added up, fast. What surprised everyone wasn't just the savings, but how Eli did it. He never took credit in meetings. Instead, he'd say, "The team in maintenance helped me test this," or "The night security crew flagged this issue first." He made people feel seen, not replaced. Slowly, the whispers changed. From "Who does he think he is?" to "Did you see what he did with the boiler?" to "Hey, Eli, can you take a look at this?" Even the head engineer, a man who'd worked at the company for 20 years and wore his skepticism like a badge, started stopping by the mechanical room just to talk. "One night he brought 2 coffees, he said, leaning against a pipe. "I used to think you were just lucky, but you're not. You're paying attention in a way the rest of us forgot how to." Eli stirred his coffee. "Machines don't lie. They just get ignored." The engineer nodded. "Maybe it's time we started listening again." Meanwhile, the man in the suit watched it all unfold with quiet pride. He began inviting Eli to strategy sessions, not as a token, but as a voice that mattered. At first, Eli sat silently, arms crossed, taking it all in. But one day, during a heated debate about upgrading the building's network infrastructure, he spoke up. "You're planning to rip out all the old wiring," he said, "but half of it is still good. The problem isn't the cables, it's the junction boxes. They're corroded. Replace those and you save $500,000. The room went quiet. The project lead looked stunned. "How do you know that?" "I crawled through the conduit last Tuesday. Saw it myself, they checked." He was right. From then on, no major decision was made without Eli's input. Not because of his title, but because he'd earned their trust, one honest fix at a time. But the real test came during a surprise fire drill. It was a Thursday afternoon. Alarms blared, lights flashed. People poured into the stairwells. But on the 19th floor, the emergency exit door wouldn't unlock. Panic started to ripple through the crowd. Someone called security. Someone else called building ops. The drill was turning into a real emergency. Down in the basement, Eli heard the alert over the intercom. He didn't wait for orders. He ran. By the time he reached the 19th floor, a small crowd had gathered, frustrated and confused. The electronic lock was dead, no power, no manual override. The fire warden was sweating, radio crackling with static. Eli pushed through gently. "Let me see." He knelt by the door mechanism, pulled out his multi-tool, and within seconds found the issue. A blown fuse in the backup battery pack. He swapped it with a spare from his belt, something he always carried, just in case. The door clicked open. People clapped. Someone cheered. But Eli just stood, brushed off his knees, and said, "Next time, check the fuses before you assume the whole system's junk." The man in the suit, who'd been watching from the stairwell above, felt a swell of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the flashy, headline-grabbing kind, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing you've built something real. Later that week, he called a company-wide meeting. Not in the boardroom, but in the main lobby. He stood on a small platform, no notes, no slides. "I want to tell you a story," he began, "about a man who saw a broken elevator and didn't walk away, who saw waste and didn't ignore it, who saw people struggling and didn't look down but reached out." He didn't name Eli, he didn't have to. Everyone knew. "From now on," he announced, "we're launching the Ground Up Innovation Program. Any employee, anyone, can submit ideas to improve how this building runs. No degree required. No title needed, just good thinking." He paused, then added, "Because brilliance doesn't wear a uniform. It wears many, and it's time we started looking for it everywhere." After the meeting, Eli found him near the coffee station. "You didn't have to do that," Eli said. "Yes, I did," the man replied, "because you showed me what I was missing." That night, as Eli walked home under a sky full of stars, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily. "Dad, my teacher said someone donated new science lab equipment to our school. She said it was anonymous. Was that you?" He smiled. He hadn't told anyone, but yes, it was him. The first paycheck from his new role had come in. He'd sent half of it to the hospital. The other half he'd given to Lily's school, with one request: buy the kind of tools that let kids take things apart and put them back together. Because that's where it all started, with someone who wasn't afraid to open a panel and see what was inside. Back at the office, the man in the suit sat alone in his office, looking at a photo on his desk, not of a yacht or a trophy, but of a simple hand-drawn thank you card from Lily, with a smiling son and the words, "My dad fixes everything, even me." He didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The fixes would get bigger. The impact would spread, but none of it would matter if they forgot the lesson from that first minute in the hallway. Sometimes, the person who can fix everything is the one no one thought to ask. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they happened steadily, like water carving a path through stone. What started as one man fixing an elevator grew into something much bigger. The ground-up innovation program wasn't just a memo on a bulletin board. It became real. People began speaking up. Janitors suggested better trash routes. Security guards pointed out blind spots in camera coverage. Even the cafeteria staff proposed a compost system that cut food waste by 40%. And every idea that worked got implemented, and the person behind it got thanked, not just with words, but with bonuses, with recognition, with respect. But at the center of it all was Eli. He wasn't loud. He didn't seek the spotlight. Yet somehow he became the quiet heartbeat of the whole effort. Engineers started dropping by his workspace, a small, tidy corner in the basement now officially labeled Systems Optimization Hub, just to bounce ideas off him. New hires were told, if you're stuck, go talk to Eli. He sees the whole building like it's one big machine. And he did. He knew which pipes groaned before they leaked, which servers overheated when it rained, which lights flickered when the elevator ran. He didn't just fix problems, he prevented them. And in doing so, he saved the company more money than any single executive had in years. But money wasn't what drove him. It never had been. One evening, as he walked through the nearly empty lobby after a long shift, he passed the front desk where a young woman was sorting mail. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, Eli. My brother got hired in maintenance last week. Said he only got the interview because of your program." Eli nodded. "He's good with his hands? He rebuilt our whole kitchen after the flood last year. No contractor? Just him and YouTube. Then he'll do fine," Eli said. "Tell him to come see me if he gets stuck." He kept walking, but the exchange stayed with him. This wasn't just about efficiency or profit margins anymore. It was about people, real people with real skills, finally getting a chance to use them. That meant more to him than any raise ever could. Still, not everyone was happy. One afternoon, Eli was called to the 32nd floor, a sleek, glass-walled office where the senior leadership team held their private strategy sessions. The man in the suit was there, along with 3 others, the CFO, the head of operations, and a woman from corporate compliance who rarely left headquarters. "Have a seat," the man said, gesturing to a chair that probably cost more than Eli's monthly rent. Eli stayed standing. "I'm good," the CFO cleared his throat. "We've reviewed your recent proposals," he began, voice tight. "The energy savings are impressive, no question. But some of your methods, they're unconventional, bypassing standard procurement, rewiring systems without formal engineering sign-off. It's creating liability issues." Eli didn't flinch. "I document everything. Every change, every part, every test. It's all in the system. And nothing I've done has broken a rule. Just skipped the red tape that was slowing us down." "The rules exist for a reason," the compliance officer said coolly. "Safety, accountability, safety." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Last month I found a gas valve in the boiler room that was 2 days from failing. I replaced it myself because your approved vendor had a 3-week wait. You want to wait 3 weeks next time? See how that goes?" Silence filled the room. The man in the suit leaned forward. "He's right. And if we lose him because we're more worried about paperwork than people, we've already failed." The CFO shifted in his chair. "We're not trying to push him out. We just need structure, oversight. Then give him a team," the man said. "Not a leash." And that's exactly what happened. 2 weeks later, Eli stood in a newly renovated room on the 5th floor. Bright, open, filled with workbenches, monitors, and tool racks. On the door, a simple sign, Field Innovation Unit. Inside, 6 people waited. 3 former custodians, 2 night shift electricians, and a retired mechanic who'd been working part-time in the parking garage. All of them had submitted ideas through the program. All of them had been overlooked until now. "Welcome," Eli said, stepping inside. "You're not here because you have degrees. You're here because you see things others miss. And from today on, you don't have to ask permission to fix what's broken." He didn't give a speech. He handed out tablets, showed them the shared dashboard, and said, "First assignment, walk the building. Find one thing that doesn't make sense, then fix it." By the end of the week, they'd rerouted a faulty drainage pipe that had been flooding the loading dock for months, reprogrammed the smart lighting in the conference rooms to adjust based on natural light, saving another $8,000 a month, and built a simple app that let any employee report maintenance issues with a photo and location. No forms, no calls. Productivity soared. Morale lifted. Even the cleaning staff started wearing their uniforms with a little more pride. But the real turning point came during a company-wide outage. It was a Tuesday. A storm rolled in fast, thunder cracking like gunshots, rain hammering the windows. Then at 2:17 p.m., the entire building went dark. Not just the lights, servers, elevators, security systems, everything. Backup generators kicked in, but only partially. The data center was running on fumes. Panic spread. The IT team scrambled. The facilities manager barked orders into a radio. Executives huddled in the dim emergency lighting, faces pale with dread. Millions in transactions were frozen. Client calls were dropping. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a crisis. Down in the basement, Eli and his team were already moving. While others waited for diagnostics, Eli knew. "It's the main transformer," he said. "The surge protector failed. I've been warning about it for weeks." He grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight and a toolkit. His team followed without question. They reached the electrical vault just as the head engineer arrived, soaked and frantic. "We can't get a reading. The panel's fried." Eli didn't argue. He knelt, opened a secondary access hatch most people didn't know existed, and shone his light inside. Sure enough, the primary surge suppressor was charred, but the backup was intact. It just wasn't engaging because a relay switch had jammed. "Hand me the insulated pliers," he said. One of his team members, Maria, the former custodian who'd once fixed a jammed garbage compactor with a coat hanger, handed them over without a word. Eli worked quickly, carefully. Sparks flew once, but he didn't flinch. With a soft click, the relay reset. The backup system roared to life. Lights flickered back on. Servers hummed. Elevators chimed. The whole thing took 11 minutes. Upstairs, people cheered. Someone clapped. The CEO, visiting from overseas, was told what happened and insisted on meeting the team. But Eli wasn't there when the praise came. He was back in the vault, double-checking connections, making sure it wouldn't happen again. Because for him, the job wasn't done when the lights came back on. It was done when the problem couldn't come back at all. Later that night, the man in the suit found him in the innovation unit, sipping bad coffee from a paper cup, reviewing schematics on a tablet. "You saved us today," he said quietly. Eli shook his head. "We saved us, my team. They're the reason it worked. You built that team, because you gave me the chance." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the building around them steady and strong. Then the man said, "I've been thinking. This shouldn't just be for one building." Eli looked up. "What do you mean?" "Our other offices, Chicago, London, Singapore, they're all running the same old systems. Same waste, same blind spots. What if we expand the program? Make your team a model for the whole company?" Eli considered it. He thought about Maria, who now trained new hires on electrical safety. About Dev, the ex-mechanic who designed a tool cart that cut repair time in half. About the pride in their eyes when they walked through the halls now, not as invisible workers but as problem solvers. "Only if they lead it," Eli said. "Not me, them, I'm not a manager. I'm a fixer, but they've got what it takes to teach others." The man smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." Within a month, the Field Innovation Unit became a global initiative. Eli's team recorded short videos, simple, no jargon, showing how to spot early signs of system failure, how to repurpose old parts, how to listen to a machine like it's talking to you. Those videos were sent to every Veridian office worldwide. In London, a night shift cleaner used Eli's method to detect a water leak before it flooded the server room. In Singapore, a security guard reconfigured the AC units in the data hall using tips from Maria's tutorial. In Chicago, a former delivery driver, now part of their local innovation squad, cut energy costs by 30% just by adjusting thermostat schedules based on real occupancy. Not assumptions, the company didn't just save money. It saved trust. Employees who'd felt like cogs in a machine now felt like owners of it. And through it all, Eli stayed grounded. He still came in at night, still wore his coveralls, still ate his sandwich in the basement. But now, when he walked through the halls, people didn't just nod. They stopped to ask questions,
To thank him.
to share their own ideas. One evening, as he packed up to leave, Lily called. "Dad," she said, voice bright, "I got picked for the robotics club. And guess what? I told them about how you fixed the elevator with 1 minute. They said I should bring you in to talk." Eli laughed, a real full laugh he hadn't heard from himself in years. "Maybe I will. Do you think I could be like you someday?" "You already are," he said softly. "You see things. You care enough to fix them. That's all it takes." He hung up, stood for a moment in the quiet hallway, and looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see all the wires, pipes, and circuits humming above him, all working together because someone had believed they could. And in that moment he knew. This wasn't just a job. It was a legacy, not built with press releases or awards, but with small acts of courage, kindness, and quiet competence. The man in the suit had offered him a role. But Eli had given the whole company something far more valuable, a reminder that the best solutions don't always come from the top. Sometimes they rise from the ground, from the hands of those who've been cleaning up everyone else's messes, and finally get the chance to build something better. 2 years had passed since that morning in the hallway. The morning a broken elevator and one quiet sentence changed everything. The building still stood tall in the city skyline, but it felt different now. Lighter, more alive, not because of new glass or smarter software, but because the people inside it finally believed they mattered. Eli no longer worked alone in the basement. His team, now called the Field Innovation Collective, had grown to 23 people across 3 continents. They didn't wear suits. They didn't sit in boardrooms unless they had something real to say. But when they spoke, executives listened. Because they didn't talk in projections or buzzwords. They talked in fixes and savings and lives made easier. And it wasn't just about machines anymore. One of Eli's team members in London had noticed that night shift workers were skipping meals because the cafeteria closed at 6 p.m. So they converted an old storage closet into a 24-hour snack station, stocked with healthy food, paid for through energy savings their unit had generated. In Singapore, another member started a mentorship program pairing retired tradespeople with young hires, bridging the gap between old-school know-how and new tech. These weren't corporate initiatives. They were human ones, born from people who finally had the space to care. Back home, Eli still came in at night, still wore his coveralls. But now, when he walked through the halls, kids from the local high school sometimes waited near the service entrance, hoping to catch a word with him. He'd started hosting monthly Fix-It Saturdays at a community center, teaching teenagers how to take apart old radios, rewire lamps, troubleshoot bikes. Not to make them engineers, but to show them that broken things can be mended. That they themselves weren't broken, just waiting for the right hands to believe in them. His daughter Lily was doing better. The treatments had worked. She was back in school full-time, her laugh loud and unburdened again. She'd even built a small robot for her science fair that could sort recycling using a camera and a few salvaged motors. When the judges asked who taught her, she'd said, "My dad. He says everything's fixable if you're patient and pay attention." The man in the suit had changed too. He still ran the company, but he ran it differently. He'd stopped measuring success only in quarterly profits. Now, he asked, "Are people proud to work here? Are we solving real problems, not just for shareholders, but for human beings?" He'd even turned down a lucrative contract because the client refused to adopt fair labor practices. When his board questioned him, he simply said, "We don't just build technology, we build trust. And trust isn't for sale." One evening, as the city glittered below, he stood on the rooftop garden of the building, the same spot where he used to pace alone, stressed and isolated. Now it was filled with employees eating dinner, laughing, sharing stories. A small stage had been set up for the company's annual recognition gala, but this wasn't like the old galas with tuxedos and champagne towers. Tonight there were paper plates, string lights, and a potluck table groaning with dishes from 20 different cultures. Eli was there, sitting on a bench near the edge, watching the sunset with Lily beside him. She was showing him a drawing she'd made, a cartoon of him as a superhero with a wrench instead of a cape, fixing a giant robot shaped like the building. "You're embarrassing me," he said, but he was smiling. "Nah," she replied, "you're just modest, but everyone knows you're the reason this place works." Before he could answer, a voice came from behind them. "She's not wrong." They turned. The man in the suit stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Eli. "Mind if I join?" "Always," Eli said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to deep purple. Below, music started playing. Someone had brought a guitar. A group began singing off-key but joyful. Finally, the man spoke. "A reporter asked me today how I discovered you. Said they wanted to write a feature on unlikely innovators." Eli snorted. "You didn't tell them, did you?" "I did. I told them exactly what happened. That you said, 'Give me 1 minute, I can fix that.' And I chuckled. Then watched in silence. Lily's eyes lit up. "That's the title. You should call the article that." Eli shook his head. "It's not about me." "But it is," the man said gently. "Not because you're special, though you are, but because you reminded us that talent isn't always where we expect it to be. Sometimes it's mopping floors at 3 a.m., waiting for someone to notice." Eli looked down at his hands, still rough, still stained with oil, but now also marked with the quiet pride of someone who'd been seen. "I didn't do anything anyone else couldn't do," he said. "I just didn't stop trying." "And that," the man said, "is the rarest thing of all." Later that night, during the informal awards portion of the gala, the man stepped onto the small stage. No podium, no teleprompter, just him and a microphone. "I'm not here to talk about profits or platforms," he began. "I'm here to talk about people. About the woman who suggested we recycle printer cartridges and turned it into a program that now funds school supplies for 500 kids a year. About the man who used his knowledge of plumbing to redesign our water system and cut waste by 60%. About the team that built a mobile app so janitors in our overseas offices could report hazards in their own language and get help in minutes, not days." He paused, then smiled. "But it all started with 1 minute. 1 man, 1 broken elevator, and the courage to say, 'I can fix that.'" He looked out at the crowd, his eyes finding Eli near the back. "We used to think innovation came from fancy labs and Ivy League degrees. But real innovation, the kind that lasts, comes from care, from paying attention, from believing that everyone, no matter their title or uniform, has something valuable to offer." Applause rose, not the polite kind, but the warm, heartfelt kind that comes from shared understanding. Afterward, as people mingled and music played, a young intern approached Eli, nervous but determined. "Sir, I've been working in mailroom for 6 months. I notice the package scanners keep freezing when it's humid. I think it's the internal fan clogged with dust. I cleaned one yesterday, it worked fine after." Eli studied him for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small multi-tool, worn but well kept. He handed it to the intern. "Keep it," he said, "and tomorrow come see me at 10 p.m. We'll check the rest together." The intern's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Eli said. "Because you didn't just see a problem. You fixed it. And that's where it all begins." As the night wound down and people drifted home, Eli walked Lily to the car. The city was quiet now, the streets glistening from an earlier rain. She held his hand like she used to when she was small. "Do you think they'll remember us?" she asked suddenly. "Who?" "The people here. In the future. Will they remember what you did?" Eli thought about it. "I hope not," he said finally. She looked confused. "Why not?" "Because if they remember me, it means they still think it's unusual for someone like me to be heard. But if they don't remember, if this just feels normal, like it should have always been this way, that means we really changed something." She squeezed his hand. "Then I hope they forget you fast," he laughed. And the sound carried down the empty street like a promise. Back inside the building, the man in the suit stood once more by the executive elevator, the same one that had stalled all those years ago. He pressed the button. The doors opened instantly, smooth and silent. He stepped inside but didn't press a floor. Just stood there for a moment, looking at his reflection in the polished metal. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Give me 1 minute. I can fix that." And for the first time, he didn't chuckle. He believed it, because the greatest legacy wasn't in stock prices or headlines. It was in the quiet confidence of a janitor who knew how things worked. In the intern who dared to speak up. In the daughter who believed she could build something too. In every person who now walked through those halls knowing their voice mattered. The elevator doors closed, but the story didn't end. It kept going, floor by floor, fix by fix, heart by heart. Because once you teach people they can fix what's broken, they never stop trying. And sometimes all it takes is 1 minute. And someone willing to watch in silence.